Hello and welcome to What the Just Happened Today, your essential guide to the daily shock and awe in national politics. I'm Joe Amditis. Let's get to it. It's Monday, April 5th, 2021. Welcome to Day 76. A record 4 million people in the United States received a coronavirus vaccine on Saturday. Over the past 7 days, an average of 3.1 million shots have been administered each day, and about 1 in 4 adults are now fully vaccinated. This according to Andy Slavitt, the White House senior advisor for COVID-19 response. While the daily coronavirus death toll in the United States is at its lowest level in months, the 7-day average of new cases rose 7% to 64,000, according to CDC Director Rochelle Walensky. In Michigan, daily new cases are up 39% compared with a week ago. Experts, however, disagree on whether the United States is on the cusp of a fourth wave or if it's seeing the last gasps of the 14-month pandemic. Michael Osterholm, an advisor to Biden's COVID-19 advisory board, predicted that the next 2 weeks would bring the highest number of cases reported globally since the beginning of the pandemic. Osterholm called Michigan's 8,400 new cases a wake-up call to everyone. Dr. Scott Gottlieb, former head of the FDA under Trump, however, said he did not see a fourth wave, saying, "I think with the rate of vaccination that we're having right now, I think that there's enough immunity in the population that you're not going to see a true fourth wave of infection." Moving on, nearly 200 companies signed a joint statement against proposals that threaten to restrict voting access in dozens of U.S. states. In a statement, the companies said, "We call on elected leaders in every state capital and in Congress to work across the aisle and ensure that every eligible American has the freedom to easily cast their ballot and participate fully in our democracy." In Texas, there are currently 49 restrictive bills that have been introduced in the state legislature. Senate Bill 7, for instance, would ban overnight early voting and drive-through early voting. The state house is also considering its own voting bill, House Bill 6, which would prohibit election officials from sending absentee ballot applications to voters without their request. Mitch McConnell warned corporations of serious consequences if they use their economic power to act like a woke parallel government. McConnell called corporate opposition to restrictive new voting laws the outrage industrial complex. Since 2015, corporations have donated more than $50 million to state lawmakers and state legislators supporting voter suppression bills, including $22 million during the 2020 election. Meanwhile, Treasury Secretary Janet Yellen called for a global minimum corporate tax rate, saying she wants to halt what she described as an international race to the bottom by countries competing to lure corporations with lower taxes. As part of the Biden administration's $2 trillion infrastructure and jobs proposal, the United States would raise the domestic corporate tax rate to 28% from its current 21%, raise the international minimum rate for foreign income from U.S. companies to 21%, up from 10.5%, and make it harder for foreign-owned companies with U.S. operations to benefit from shifting their profits to low-tax countries. The Trump administration lowered the U.S. tax rate from 35% to 21%, arguing that U.S. companies were incentivized to relocate offshore. Yellen criticized Trump's unilateralist strategy, saying the U.S. isolated ourselves and retreated from the international order that we created. Speaking of Trump, the Trump campaign refunded 10.7% of the money that it raised online in 2020, totaling $122 million. Donors complained of fraud to banks and credit card companies after the Trump operation had used multiple pre-checked boxes to enroll them into recurring contributions. In total, the Trump and the party operation raised $1.2 billion. Meanwhile, the Supreme Court vacated an appeals court ruling that Trump could not block critics from his Twitter feed. In 2019, a lower court ruled that Trump's account was a public forum because he had used it to regularly communicate with the public, and that he could not exclude people based on their viewpoints. Both sides in the suit agreed that the case is moot since Trump is no longer president and has been banned from Twitter. In a 12-page concurring opinion, Justice Clarence Thomas wrote that the court will need to examine the power of tech companies, saying that it is unprecedented to have control of so much speech in the hands of a few private parties. And finally, Arkansas's Republican governor vetoed an anti-transgender healthcare bill that would make it illegal for transgender minors to receive gender-affirming procedures. Governor Asa Hutchinson called the legislation a product of the culture war in America, even though he believed the bill was well-intentioned. The Arkansas state legislature could still overturn Hutchinson's veto of the bill. And in the polls, the Associated Press says 40% of Americans disapprove of the Biden administration's handling of the unaccompanied migrant children arriving at the U.S.-Mexico border, while 24% say they approve and 35% have no opinion. And Reuters says 55% of Republicans believe the January 6th insurrection at the U.S. Capitol was led by left-wing activists trying to make Trump look bad. 51% of Republicans also believe that the riot was mostly peaceful, law-abiding Americans, and 55% of Republicans believe Trump's 2020 election loss was the result of illegal voting or election rigging. That's all for now. You can find the links and sources for all of these stories on the main website. And as always, visit whatthefjusthappenedtoday.com for the latest news and headlines. Until next time, I'm Joe Amditas.